Welcome to You Can't Break Us, the podcast sharing real stories of parental alienation and family court injustice. I'm your host, Kaylin Hawkinson. Each episode, I sit down with brave guests who open up about their personal journeys, the pain, the resilience, and the fight for justice. These stories are raw, real, and powerful because speaking out is how we break the silence and remind the world, you can't break us. So, hi, Sam. Thank you for joining today. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story. Yeah, could you maybe start by explaining when the alienation started or how that began?
Yeah, so pretty much when my ex-husband left me, we didn't have court orders yet. We had a parenting plan where we shared the children. And over time, he was just undermining every single thing that I said or that I wanted for the children. He would put them in dangerous situations, which he knew would be really distressing to me. I think I mentioned yesterday he'd do things like take them on a helicopter without my permission, put them on the back of his motorcycle on the highway. And these were things that were intended to instill fear in me while the children were in his care. He would force them to have the phone on loudspeaker when they were talking to me. So I noticed when that started to happen that the kids were quite cold and rude to me, and that was obviously to appease him. He would criticize gifts that I bought them, say they were stupid or, they could have got something better. He was constantly calling the police on me. When I say constantly, I'd say more than 20 times the police were called on me. Constantly calling child services and trying to create in the children's minds that I was an unsafe parent. Other things that he would do, he would make the kids give gifts that they had made for me to his girlfriend. And essentially, in his mind, when he repartnered, I had no role really as the children's mother. I was just extinguished as an important person in their life. He'd say things to the kids like, your mum only works because she doesn't want to spend time with you. He would, although this is not alienation as such, he and his girlfriend were constantly ringing my workplace, trying to get me fired, which was extremely distressing to me because that was my only source of income. He wouldn't pay for anything. He wasn't working. So he didn't seem to really even care about the children's well-being in terms of me being able to adequately provide for them. He then sought a protection order. And I don't know if you know much about the system in Australia, but essentially anyone can go to the police and make a report. And it's up to the person who the report's been made against to defend themselves, which is an extremely expensive process. So in the end, I accepted the protection order to avoid going to court. So you can do what's called, you accept it without admissions. So you're saying, all right, I'll agree to the terms of the order, but I'm not admitting to any of the things that you've accused me of. That left me in a situation where I couldn't even see my own children at school because the protection order was not to be within 50 metres of him and his partner. She then enrolled her child at my children's school, so I wasn't able to go to any of the events at school, which was really upsetting to me. It was just a campaign of unbelievable psychological torment. And unfortunately with these cases, a lot of the things that they do are not illegal, but they cause unbelievable moral and psychological injury. I've now got complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I have been hospitalised for it. So this is years and years and years after these behaviours.
Wow, yeah. So is it one child or more than one?
Two. I have two children. They're both grown up now. I eventually
Two children. Okay.
left the situation. It was unbearable for me. I got legal advice that said that I could return to Sydney, where we were originally from. Having said that, we had been in Coffs Harbour
Okay.
for 3 years. I returned to Sydney with the children. He was served with court papers to say that we were going through the family court. Unfortunately, he got a recovery order and the judge granted it, and the children were returned to him. He was on drugs. He was being abusive. His girlfriend was being abusive to
Because
my
you
daughter.
moved?
Yes, because I moved, there was nothing to prevent him from going back to Sydney himself. That's where we were from. We didn't have any connections to where we moved to. I believe that the move to Coffs Harbour was entirely intended to destabilise me, to make me leave my well-paying job, and to put me in a place where I was completely socially isolated. The prospect of me getting employment up there also was very, very difficult, and it was kind of a miracle that I did manage to get a quality job up there and was earning pretty good money, but that's certainly not what he expected to happen. So I returned
Right.
to Sydney with the children, and then he and I enrolled them in school, and we were kind of settled, and he got a recovery order and had them returned. It then took us 18 months to get into the family court in Sydney. So essentially he was being abusive to my daughter. He kind of made a golden child out of my son. He wouldn't let me talk to them on the phone. He'd miss their flights. I also got court ordered to pay for their flights, which was really difficult. Some of those flights were in excess of $700.
Yeah.
So interrupt me if you want to ask any questions. I feel like I'm just talking at you.
No, you're fine. Anything to explain alienation like this, and that's also showing how the narcissist behaviors are, how they
Yes.
manipulate the system, manipulate the children. It sounds like he set you up to move to kind of plan on isolating you there and take the children and
Yes.
get away with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 18 months that this all went on was
And
just,
how did
it was
it
just
feel going
horrendous.
through
It was,
court?
I look at the family court, it was just completely and utterly traumatizing. It was shocking to me. What you believe to be a place of justice, where there's going to be some common sense prevailing, where the best interests of the children are going to be served, none of those things happened. None of them. I had never done anything to my children. I have been a loving mother to them. I adore my children. And to have to go into a place with strangers, justifying your love for your own children or your capacity to parent them to people who don't know anything about your family or your kids. It's such an invasion of the family unit, and having your entire life scrutinized. It was just completely humiliating. It was financially destroying. I spent $140,000 in family court. And that was money that was desperately needed to continue our lives. It was really, I'm not criticizing my solicitor. She was fantastic. My barrister was fantastic. The legal team ultimately got me a really good result. But the toll that all of that took on us was unbearable. He was just constantly lying.
Yeah.
So I was constantly defending myself. Letter after letter after letter came from his solicitor with just absolute garbage in it. I did catch him out on quite a few lies. I think I was saying to you yesterday, he accused me of stalking him and harassing him. On the date that he accused me of doing that, I was actually interstate for work, so I was able to provide my flight ticket and my hotel accommodation. Once I sort of exposed a few things like that, his credibility did become quite diminished. But having said all of this, so we went through this process. He lost parental responsibility. He didn't have any say in anything, but he did have access to the kids. He had them for school holidays and a weekend a month or something like that. And again, I was ordered to pay for the flights. What he started to do, well, he essentially just ignored the orders. So after going through all of this for 18 months, he just completely ignored the orders. He was ordered to have drug testing, hair follicle drug testing done. He shaved all of the hair off his body so that test couldn't be executed. He suffered no consequences for that. We just didn't get the test result. Still, he had access to the children. He then stopped returning my son. So my daughter sort of stopped going to see him, and he didn't seem too bothered by that. But he really honed in on my son, absolutely relentlessly honed in on my son. He would tell my son to call the police when he was in my care. Maybe 6 times the police were called by my son. He, at the end of it, he enrolled my son in another school when he didn't even have any parental responsibility. They just didn't send him back. They enrolled him in another school and just completely ignored the court orders. I then had to go back to court. I had to get a recovery order. I think it cost me nearly $10,000 to get that. And again, absolutely no consequences for him. The judge just told him he had to return my son. It became so hard that my boy was just utterly traumatized by the manipulation and brainwashing that he was being subjected to. He was coming home furious with my mother and I, throwing these huge tantrums, trying to run away, refusing to go to school, just absolutely traumatized, because they were, instead of letting him just settle in and be happy, they were saying to him, we're going to get you back. You don't have to do what any of them say. Don't tell the school to fuck off. All of this kind of stuff. So it created a whole lot of problems at the school. The principal was involved, and to be honest with you, I gave up. I just gave up. So my son was just 11 at this time, and I said, you can go if you want. He was crying every day. He was secretly ringing his dad when I wasn't around, and they were plotting this plan to get him out of care. He left when he was 11. He's now 22, and I have not seen or heard from him since. He has been completely alienated from our entire family. He hasn't seen his grandparents. He hasn't seen his cousins. He hasn't seen his aunties and uncles. And he's now 22 years old. I had hoped that when he grew older, he might have sort of seen some reason. Unfortunately, it's almost like he's in a cult, because he doesn't have access to anybody else's opinions or anyone else's story about what kind of a person I am. I have no idea what they have told him. No idea. And it's been absolutely maddening. I more recently found out that my ex-husband's now made him a director of a business, which is terrifying to me. He's a con man. He's evil. He's a narcissist. He is not someone I want my son in business with. He's got a trail of destruction behind him in business, and I think this could be really dangerous. I did send my son a text. He ignores every text I send him, ignores every phone call. I just have no access to him at all. So it's a thing that I'm very
unfortunate.
passionate. And the whole thing is, the whole process is so wrong. I think the family court needs to be just completely disbanded. An adversarial system with narcissistic personalities is just a fire of trauma. I think that there are a lot of people in the family court that don't want to see this resolved because they're making a lot of money out of it. Our expert witness charged $8,000. We didn't get any choice of who that was. It was just, there's your witness, there's your expert report writer, there's your $8,000 bill. He said to me that he didn't believe my ex-partner was narcissistic because he wasn't grandiose. Not all narcissists are grandiose. Mine was very able to feign humility and would certainly come across as someone quite likable. I think my experience of narcissistic abuse for 11 years should stand you know, higher than an hour's session with a so-called expert. You know, I believe I could read affidavits and spot women who'd been victims of narcissistic abuse probably from the first sentence. All these folks do exactly the same thing. I also believe that the family court is, every case, I believe, involves at least one personality disordered parent. There are a lot of processes that you go through before you end up in court, and I think it's only the most vindictive and abusive people that make it through right to the end. We had a 4-day hearing. And I think an interesting statistic in Australia, most women who lose custody of their children in the Australian Family Court, Federal Court, lose them because of mental health. And I believe that that compromised mental health is a direct result of having been in a relationship with a narcissistic partner and being subjected to systems abuse. I believe most of those women were just completely traumatized by the time they were in court, and that was used against them, and they've lost their children to an abuser. It sickens me. I find that just sickening. So the majority of mothers are losing because of mental health, and the majority of fathers are losing because of domestic violence or drug and alcohol abuse. So I think that statistic says a lot, really. It really does. Also, the percentage of cases that end up in the family court, which is relatively small amount. Most people are able to resolve a parenting plan at mediation or whatever. It's almost direct correlation to the percentage of personality disordered people in society is roughly the same amount of cases, proportion of cases that end up in family court. I think that's a really interesting statistic.
Yeah, and that's very true, that a common thing that the narcissist uses that I've personally experienced and that I hear of when talking to others, like you said, mental stability, saying that the mother is mentally unstable, an unfit parent, dangerous, all comes back to the mental aspect. So I think that's a very common thing that they use against the mother to, be abusive, create the trauma, put them in that terrible situation where they are causing the trauma and the pain on them, to then turn around and say, oh, look, she's mentally unstable. It's very common.
Yep. And then I think, there's a lot of people who, certainly in my case, who don't want to seek any kind of psychological help in the event that your medical records are subpoenaed and used in court, So even when you need the help, you can't really seek it safely.
Right. Because they'll use it against you, and then create it worse in court.
Yeah. So
how did... Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's probably just lagging, like we said. So one question I have was, and I know you call it something different there, but like CPS, Child Protective Services, were they ever involved? Did he ever make false reports to them on you?
Yes, he did. He made several. Sorry, the camera's being a bit weird. He made several. They did interview me. They did go to the children's schools, which again was just embarrassing. I actually received a letter from them after they interviewed me saying that I had very positively engaged with them and that the case was closed. There was no evidence of abuse. The police sort of became better as well. My son called the police to say he was being abused. 4 police officers turned up. And they said to me that he was speaking like a script, that they engage with a lot of victims of abuse and they don't generally talk like that. He was saying things like in almost robotically saying, I am in fearful of my life. And, it was just a really robotic kind of child talking to the police. And I think they were able to see through that pretty easily. So yes,
Yeah,
lots of
being
reports.
coached.
Yeah, lots of reports.
Yeah.
So the kids, thankfully, when docs, CPS, interviewed them, didn't make any false claims against me. So they could have easily done that. They didn't.
Yeah.
So I think I was lucky in that respect that none of that kind of stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So really through the court case, you did get custody, you had your children, and then he didn't abide by the court order and he illegally kept your son.
Yes.
And well, I know you said you ended up letting him go there, but he was already kind of plotting this and manipulating your son, and
Yes.
that's how he got him still in the end, and then just cut you off.
Yes. So when Child Protective Services came, they actually made a recommendation that he not have phone communication with his father, that we were trying to sort of abate what was happening. Unfortunately, I couldn't police that, even if I didn't let him have if I didn't let him have his phone, it made me look even worse, like I was trying to stop him
Right.
from having communication with his father. That fed into the narrative that I was trying to stop him having access to his dad. And then I couldn't police it because he would have just used a phone off another kid at school or something. It was impossible to control the communication.
Yeah,
And
snuck it.
there was nothing we could do, literally nothing we could do. I think the only thing that might have helped it is if he only had access in a supervised environment, but they were not the court orders that we got or sought. We did not seek those orders.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really hard when they know how to turn situations on you. They're teaching your son, in essence, to turn against you and, call the police, make
Yes.
false reports himself, and sneak communication or plot things behind you. So you are put in this terrible situation. You're trying to protect your son from any abuse or negative coaching like that. But then in turn, the dad can then also say, she's cutting me off from my son, she's doing such and such and such. And then it's just a constant struggle trying to navigate that and know the correct way to go, because no matter what you do to protect your child, he will turn that against you and make it seem what it's not.
Yes. Yep. And I have been involved with a couple of groups that work in parental alienation in Australia. To be honest, I found even that traumatizing. I couldn't be around other women who were going through this. It was so sad. There were women in that group that committed suicide,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't go anymore. So I stopped going to that support group. It was too difficult.
Yeah, it can
So
be.
I
It's good
don't.
to have support and it's good to find something that helps, but it can also be really hard when you're surrounded by people who are going through it, when it's kind of fresh and new that you're going through. It's very
Yeah.
depressing and traumatizing. Hard to bring yourself up out of that.
Yes. It's just had
Did
really
you
long-term ramifications.
Yeah. Did you find anything
Um,
else that was a good resource or something that helped you get through it and heal or work on healing?
yeah, I have a really good therapist now, who really understands it. I read a lot of stuff about narcissism. I don't so much read it about parental alienation anymore because my son's an adult. And I kind of think, well, it's on him now, he's not a little kid anymore. I talk to other people
Yeah.
who've kind of gone through not so much the alienation, but have certainly been victims of narcissistic abuse. I think you're constantly questioning yourself to know whether you've imagined it or why you're so traumatized by it. Again, I was saying to you before that a lot of the behaviors are not illegal. they're not illegal, but they do cause deep moral and psychological injury, and it can be really difficult to come to terms with that and to understand that and understand why it's had such an impact on you. I believe it caused me brain damage. I can't focus in the way that I used to. I had very senior roles in advertising. I can't do that anymore. I can't handle any level of stress. And I think that's just as a result of being in a state of hypervigilance for years. So I have my last 3 roles in advertising have been a failure. I kind of resent that because it's my career and I was very good at it. I now run a cleaning business because I can just be in my own head and just not really have that much stress. So it's certainly impacted me career-wise. I found that really frustrating, and I don't know how to repair that part of my brain that's been essentially damaged. So I found the reading very helpful to understand that, because I'm like, why does my brain not work properly anymore? It just doesn't work properly anymore. And I understand that that is a symptom of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I went into hospital nearly 12 months ago into a program that specialises in complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and I found that really helpful. But again, you know, those things are really expensive. That cost me $25,000 to go into that hospital. It's a female-only facility, so it's quite, it's very well organised, but most people don't have $25,000 to book themselves into therapy. I had to take that out of my superannuation fund. So I feel like you should be able to sue these people for this long-term harm that they have done to you. You know, I think the other thing that I find maddening is the fact that you're forced to mediate with them before you can even go to court. In any other scenario where you've been abused, you would never be forced to mediate with the person who has abused you. And it's just another instrument of domestic violence. And I just, in 2025, cannot understand why we're not doing it better. I just cannot understand that. I cannot understand why we have a police force that doesn't understand narcissism or sociopathy. We have a seemingly legal system that doesn't understand it. I think it will only probably work if they have a panel of experts who know this stuff back to front and preferably have life experience of it. I don't think you can learn it from a book. I think you've got to experience it, understand it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is very true. And I feel also that it should be required. There should be someone in a court case when it deals with narcissism, parental alienation. Someone should be required to have background knowledge on that. I'm surprised too that it's not a requirement, and you're going through a process that's pretty much set up to fail when you're against a narcissist, because they are not willing to co-parent, they counter-parent, and they do everything they can to alienate the child from you. So no court order, no court case is going to help that, because you'll get right out of the court case and they won't abide by the order, they'll break the order, they'll keep the child. It's just a pattern. Yeah, I don't know how it will improve. We've recently had a Royal Commission into the family court in Australia. They've made some changes. I don't think nearly enough, but there has been some changes. We did have a kind of system before where it was a presumption of 50-50 shared care. So that's recently been wound back. There were a lot of kids, you know, that were going into 50-50 care where there'd been domestic violence, sexual assault, all kinds of stuff. It was crazy what was happening. Then you had a situation where, you know, breastfeeding mothers were being forced to hand over babies for 50-50 care so they couldn't feed them. It just was it was nuts. The system was nuts. But I don't know. I just don't. Yeah. I just don't think it's changed enough, and I don't know what the solution is. I really just do not know what the solution is.
these people are so dangerous and so toxic and
Yeah.
so it's frightening. They have recently, I don't know if you folks have this in the States, but we have coercive control legislation now in Australia, very recently. It's not in all states yet.
Okay.
I don't even think that goes far enough.
Yeah, I don't think we do. At least I'm not completely versed in the law, especially with every state, but as far as I know from my experience there wasn't. So every little step would help though if they start to look at coercive control, look at the abuse, look at instead of just, are there bruises? Is there something physical that we see? It goes far beyond
Yeah,
that with the coercion, like you're saying, and
yeah,
psychological and emotional, coaching the children. And also, like you said, there are long term negative effects from that on the parent and the child.
yes. Yeah. I mean, my daughter has therapy. She's got panic disorder. She's a nurse. She can't work in a hospital. She has to be in private practice because of her panic disorder. Um, and the same with her. She was just
Mhm.
in a state of constant hypervigilance. It's had really, really long-term impacts on all of us. I do not know what kind of psychological state my son is
Mhm.
in. I hope to see him again,
Yeah.
but I honestly don't know if I ever will. I do not know if I will ever see him again.
Yeah. And that's sad because he's spent most of his life now under the narcissist in the narcissist environment. So that's what he's learning. That's how he's been growing up being taught now. So it's a completely different environment for a child like that. And it carries into adulthood, like he's showing.
Yeah. And his own, the other thing that's kind of a tragedy from this is that he's been alienated from his only sibling. He hasn't seen his sister. So all these
Hmm. Yeah.
relationships that were core were just eroded completely, absolutely completely. And I think he's seen his
Yeah.
sister be rejected by his father. And I think he knows if he steps out of line that the exact same thing's going to happen to him. So there is real risk of loss for him to reach out to me unless
Hmm.
he falls out with his father.
Yeah. It's like living in survival mode like that.
Yes, yes.
So going through all this, did it, maybe from before going through all of it, did it change your perspective on the legal system and how CPS handles things? Or I know we talked about hoping there can be a change, but growing up, you're kind of taught the system is justice and fighting for what's right. And so now, after going through it, did that really change your perspective on the nature of family court system?
Yeah, it changed my perspective on two things. I no longer see the police as safety. I would have always felt secure and had complete trust and faith in the police. I do not feel that way anymore. I don't want to have any interactions with police anymore. I don't feel safe. I feel there is a lot of narcissists actually in the police forces. The family court to me is literally just a house of horrors. The building itself in Australia is kind of a Gothic architecture building, and whenever I go past it, it's in the city. It's like Gotham City to me. It's like Gotham City, just a place of complete injustice and trauma. It, I never ever want to go in there ever again. And I, yeah, it's just a really traumatic place, and the exact opposite of what you expect.
Yeah.
You expect it to keep your children safe. You expect it to be justice. You expect it to be fair. And essentially, I walked out of there $140,000 worse off and
Hmm.
deeply, deeply traumatized. Which as any system that has the capacity to do that to somebody does not, should not exist.
Oh.
Um, and we're not criminals. Yeah, we're not criminals. We're mums that have to fight for our
Yeah,
right
that's
to
very
parent our own children.
unfortunate.
And you can't negotiate with these people. You just can't. They just, every turn they take is to obstruct you. And again, I believe there's a lot of people in the family court system that benefit from that high conflict. I actually don't even like the term high conflict because it kind of assumes that there's two people in battle. There's really only one person battling the other. So I think the language around sort of high conflict divorce isn't quite right. But there's these folks in there are making a lot of money. And I don't know what people do that don't have any money to fight. I don't know. They represent themselves, I guess. You know, it compromises your employment. You're constantly taking days off. You're constantly going to see a solicitor. You're trying to work. You're trying to function. You're trying to care for kids, do whatever. And you're literally sitting there on the edge of your seat waiting for another email to come through. Every day, every single day. And it's high stakes. These are your kids. There isn't anything higher stakes than your children. So it just, I really believe that they are not, the people involved in the process have a very well-oiled machine from their part, and I don't think they've got any vested interest in making any improvements because it essentially sees them out of work.
And I find another common thing that us as parents, we have rights. You have rights to your children, but going through whether it's CPS, the court system, just systems that are in place to protect children, a parent can sometimes feel, and I don't know if you ever felt this from any of them, but as if you don't have rights. They're talking to you or treating you as if you don't have rights to your children, even when you do.
Well, we had a situation while we were going through court. It was kind of like a supervised sort of interaction with me and the kids and I. And then this was while they were in his care. And the kids left then after this session. And the social worker wrote in her report that the kids didn't seem distressed enough to be leaving me. But my children had been in a shared care situation now for a long time. They were used to leaving me. And to read that was so sad because someone's literally saying my children don't love me enough or I don't love them enough. This random stranger with a social work certificate, it doesn't even know anything about us. So it was things like that were awful, you know. It was such an impost on the sanctity of a mother-child relationship. Like, how dare a stranger make an assumption about my love for my children? Like, it was bizarre. So lots of things like that happen in the process as well that were just so sad.
We had a few connection issues happen, so Sam ended up getting cut off, but I wanted to thank her for being on the podcast today and openly sharing her story. So thank you again, Sam. We'll keep in touch and stay connected.
Thank you for listening to You Can't Break Us. If this episode spoke to you, subscribe and leave a review. Every voice matters. Every story counts. If you or someone you know has a story to share, email youcan'tbreakuspodcast@gmail.com to connect with me. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and never stop using your voice. Because no matter what they've tried to take from us, they can't break.